You
A
must
thousand
wake.
doctors couldn't
The
save
prophecy
him,
foretold his
until a poor
return,
delivery
marked
girl
by the
touched the
serpent
vampire
sign.
prince.
He is coming.
At the heart of the royal castle, behind thick stone walls, a quiet despair hung heavier than the storm clouds above. In the grand chamber of the prince, no laughter echoed, no music played, only silence and the slow, labored rhythm of a life teetering on the edge of darkness. Prince Kale had once been strong, proud, and untouchable, the kind of prince who commanded loyalty with a glance and fear with a frown. But now he was nothing more than a fragile figure on a bed of black velvet sheets, pale as moonlight, eyes closed, lips parted as if he were listening to a world he could no longer reach. No doctor could save him, not a single one. Alchemists had tried their potions. Priests had tried their blessings. Sorcerers had whispered forbidden spells in hopes of coaxing life back into his veins. But the curse that clung to the blood of Erendor's royal family was stronger than any mortal art. It was older than the castle itself, a shadow that had stalked the line of kings and queens for centuries. Outside the castle, the city continued its ordinary life. People ran errands, traded goods, and gossiped about the endless rumors of the dying prince. Among them was Lyra, a young girl with calloused hands and a warm heart, who carried her basket of parcels through the narrow cobblestone streets. Her life was small, simple, and often lonely. She was a delivery girl, unnoticed by most, yet keenly aware of the world and the emotions that hid behind every door. Lyra's steps led her to the castle that day, carrying a parcel of herbs and rare elixirs requested by the palace doctors, potions they had abandoned long ago but had secretly kept in case of desperate need. She had no reason to believe her delivery would matter. But as she walked through the massive iron gates, she felt a peculiar weight pressing at her chest, as though the castle itself were aware of her presence. The grand hall smelled of cold stone and extinguished candles. Shadows stretched like fingers along the walls, and the servants scurried past her with nervous glances. Lyra's heart beat faster, though not from fear, but from a strange anticipation she could not explain. She had seen many sick people in her life, but nothing like this. There was a silence in the prince's chamber that felt alive, almost sacred. When the chamber doors opened, Lyra's breath caught. The prince lay there, pale as marble, his dark hair spread over the pillow like spilled ink. His face, though still handsome, bore the sharp lines of suffering and exhaustion. For a moment she feared he was already gone, that her delivery was too late, yet something in the air told her otherwise. Lyra stepped closer, the basket trembling in her hands. I have something for you, your highness," she said softly. Her voice felt fragile in the cavernous room. She did not know why she felt compelled to speak, to reach out. But the moment her fingers brushed against the prince's hand, a shock ran through her, a gentle yet terrifying warmth, as if her touch was stirring something long dead. Kale's eyes snapped open, silver gray and wide with disbelief. He gasped, staring at her as though seeing her for the first time. "Who touched me?" His voice was hoarse, filled with both anger and wonder. Lyra stepped back, startled. I didn't mean to." "No," he whispered, interrupting her. His gaze softened in a way that frightened him almost as much as it frightened her. I felt something, a life, here, inside me." The room seemed to hold its breath. The servants outside whispered nervously, unsure if this was a miracle or a further curse. Kale's pulse, so long absent, throbbed faintly under her fingers. The shadow of death that had claimed him for weeks recoiled, as if her warmth was an unfamiliar sun breaking through centuries of night. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had touched many things before, parcels, animals, even sick children, but never a man like this. He was not merely sick, he was a prince bound by a darkness she could not name. Yet in that moment she did not see a prince. She saw a boy who had been trapped too long in a world that demanded perfection. A boy who needed life, not treatment, not magic, but something simple, something human. Kale's hand twitched slightly in her grasp. The faintest spark of life danced along his veins, making his skin glow with a translucent light. His lips parted again, whispering her name before she could even ask it. Lyra! The sound of his voice, fragile and broken, cut through the gloom. Lyra felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness but from a deep, inexplicable empathy. I don't know if I can help," she admitted. "I'm just a delivery girl. I don't know anything about curses or magic." Cale's gaze was intense, piercing through her as if he could see every thought she had ever held. "Then why do I feel alive?" Lyra did not have an answer. She could only feel the truth of it in her heart. There was no spell in her basket that could have done this. There was no magic in her words. Only her touch, simple and pure, had awakened a flicker of life where nothing else could. The doctors arrived then, in a rush of robes and whispered incantations. They stared at the prince, bewildered, hands trembling over their instruments. One of them, a tall man with gray-streaked hair, muttered, "Impossible, it should not be." Cale lifted his hand, weak but defiant, and the doctors froze. The warmth of Lyra's touch spread through him, a gentle current of life that made his chest rise and fall in time with her heartbeat. He had been nothing but shadows, and now he felt a strange weight return, something he had not known for decades: hope. Yet the room was not free of darkness. The curse was still there, lurking in the corners of the chamber, coiling like a serpent. Cale could feel it pressing against him, whispering threats he could no longer ignore. He shivered, though his eyes did not leave Lyra. "You don't know what you've done," he said quietly, almost to himself. "A touch, it should not have awakened me. It should have killed you instead." Lyra swallowed hard. Fear tinged her curiosity, but she could not move away. I felt something," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand it, but I couldn't stop myself." Cale's lips curled into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Perhaps the world has forgotten what life feels like." He paused, every word weighted with centuries of isolation. "Perhaps you are the first human to remind me." A long silence settled between them, broken only by the sound of the storm outside. Rain pelted the castle walls, wind rattled the windows, and the servants kept their distance, unsure whether to flee or stay. Lyra and Cale remained, their hands still barely touching, bound by something neither could name yet understood completely. Hours passed. The doctors eventually left, muttering about miracles and omens, leaving Cale and Lyra alone in the quiet of the chamber. The prince tried to speak again, words heavy and deliberate. "Do you know the danger you carry by being here?" Lyra shook her head, unsure whether to speak or cry. "I don't even know what I've done. I only wanted to help." Cale studied her, the pain and fatigue etched into his features, and for the first time he allowed himself to hope. "Then perhaps that is enough." Even as he spoke, a shadow flickered across the chamber wall, a reminder that the curse had not yet been banished. The darkness whispered, promising torment and despair, but Lyra did not flinch. She held his hand a little tighter, her heart resolute. And then, as if the castle itself were holding its breath, Cale's eyes closed briefly, a shudder passing through him. When they opened again, they shone with a strange, new light. "You've changed everything," he whispered. "And yet I fear what comes next." Lyra tightened her grip. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we'll face it together." A distant bell tolled, marking the hour, echoing through the empty halls like a somber drumbeat of destiny. Outside the storm raged, yet inside the chamber a fragile warmth began to bloom, a warmth that neither death nor curse could entirely extinguish. And for the first time in centuries, the Prince of Urindor felt alive. But deep in the shadows, something watched. The curse recoiled and writhed, sensing the bond between human and vampire, life and death. It hissed silently, waiting for the moment it could strike back. And Lyra, brave and uncertain, did not yet know the depth of the danger she had stepped into. The storm outside continued to beat against the castle walls, a reminder that the world beyond was as ruthless as the shadows within. And Cale, The prince, who had been closer to death than life, opened his eyes and whispered her name again. "Lyra, stay with me." Her hand tightened around his, and she nodded. "I will." But neither of them could see the shadow lurking in the corner, moving with patience and cunning, waiting for the bond between them to falter. The night had just begun. The castle of Urindor was not a place of peace. Even in the quiet hours of night, the halls whispered of power and fear. Shadows clung to the corners like living things, curling around stone pillars and tapestries that depicted kings long dead. But in the prince's chamber, a small light shone. Not from candles or torches, but from something more subtle, the fragile life Cale had reclaimed with Lyra's touch. Cale lay propped on his dark velvet bed, a blanket draped loosely over his shoulders. His silver-gray eyes, once dull with the weight of death, now burned faintly with a strange vitality. Yet even as he looked at her, he felt the lingering claws of the curse within him, a cold and twisting force that refused to be silenced. Lyra moved quietly to place the herbs she had brought on the table. "The doctors said these might help, but I don't think they matter now," she said, her voice soft, almost afraid to disturb the fragile thread of life that connected them. Cale smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement in his tired gaze. "No potion, no prayer, no spell could have done this," he said. "Only you." Lyra felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had touched him once, trembling and uncertain, and now he spoke as though her mere presence had altered centuries of fate. Yet she could see the weight he carried, the exhaustion in every line of his face. He was still a prince bound by more than sickness. He was bound by history, by prophecy, and by a darkness that clung to his blood. "I don't understand it," she whispered. "How could one touch change so much?" Cale turned his gaze toward the stone window, the storm outside long gone, leaving the night clear and sharp. "I do not understand it either," he admitted. "All I know is that for the first time I feel life where there was only shadow, and yet," his voice faltered, "the curse has not loosened its grip. It watches, waits, and it will not forgive." Lyra's fingers brushed his hand again, unconsciously offering comfort. "Then we fight it," she said simply. "We find a way together." Cale looked at her, a mixture of admiration and wariness in his eyes. "You speak boldly," he said, "but you do not know what you risk. This castle, this kingdom, the shadows that haunt me, they will come for you, Lyra." Lyra did not flinch. "I am not afraid." For a moment the room fell silent. Only the ticking of a distant clock and the soft rustle of the bed curtains disturbed the stillness. Cale studied her, noting her small frame, her steady gaze, the courage she did not even realize she carried. He had expected fear. He had expected weakness. But here she was, defiant, offering herself as an anchor in a storm he had long believed he must weather alone. "You are unlike any human I have ever met," he said quietly. "Perhaps that is why the curse recoiled." Lyra shifted nervously, unsure if his words were praise or warning. I don't know. I only know I couldn't leave you alone." Cale's lips curved into a faint smile. It was not the easy smile of a carefree youth, but something deeper, a recognition of the rare bond forming between them. Yet beneath the surface, a storm brewed. The curse was alive. It had sensed Lyra's touch, her life force mingling with Cale's, and it did not retreat without a threat. Later that night, as the moon rose high above the castle, a sound broke the silence. Footsteps in the hall, deliberate, cautious. Cale's eyes narrowed. "They are coming," he murmured. "Not all who walk these halls mean well." Before Lyra could ask, the chamber door creaked open. A tall figure in dark robes stepped inside, a staff in hand and eyes sharp as knives. "Your Highness," the man said, bowing slightly. "I bring news." Cale sat upright, wary. "Speak quickly," he said, his voice steady despite the weakness that lingered in his limbs. "The council, they fear the prince's death will unravel the kingdom," the man said. "They speak of replacing you, of calling for a new heir." But his voice dropped to a whisper. "There are those who say the curse can be broken if the chosen one touches you." Lyra felt her pulse quicken. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. She had touched him, yes, but was she the one the prophecy spoke of? She had never thought herself special, never believed anyone would ever choose her for anything. And yet here she was at the center of a story larger than she could imagine. Cale's gaze found hers. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked. His tone was grave. "If the council discovers this, they may see you as a threat, or worse, a tool. I cannot protect you from everyone." Lyra swallowed hard but met his eyes steadily. "Then let them try. I will not leave you." For a brief moment, Cale allowed himself a flicker of hope. But the curse stirred within him, twisting, pressing, a cold weight that clawed at his chest. He leaned back against the pillows, feeling its power coil like a serpent. He had survived death once, but the shadow within him would not be so easily defeated. "You are brave," he said, his voice low, "and foolish, perhaps both." The night deepened, and the castle seemed to grow colder, the shadows stretching and writhing as though they had a life of their own. Cale closed his eyes briefly, trying to steady the storm within him. Lyra remained at his side, silent, her presence a steady reassurance. Days passed, each one blending into the next. Cale grew stronger, though never fully free of the curse's weight. The bond between him and Lyra deepened, unspoken words passing between them in glances, gentle touches, and moments of quiet understanding. Yet the world outside the prince's chamber was not idle. Rumors of the prince's awakening spread quickly through the castle, reaching ears that sought power, revenge, or chaos. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in blood-red hues, a messenger arrived. He was young, nervous, and trembling. "Your Highness," he stammered, "the northern nobles, they speak of taking the throne while you are weak. They claim the curse has claimed your life and the kingdom cannot wait." Cale's eyes darkened, silver-gray flaring with anger and exhaustion. "Let them try," he said quietly. "They do not understand the curse, nor the life it has allowed me to regain." Lyra stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "Then we will face them together," she said, her voice steady and sure. Cale studied her, a mixture of awe and fear in his expression. He had lived centuries, seen countless battles, and endured curses that would break the strongest man. Yet he had never encountered anyone like her, someone who could ignite hope in the heart of death itself. The following night, under the pale light of a crescent moon, Cale led Lyra to the balcony overlooking the castle gardens. The wind whipped around them, tugging at her hair and his cloak. The world below seemed peaceful, almost fragile, unaware of the darkness that clung to its prince. "You feel it, don't you?" Cale whispered. "The curse, it senses you. It knows you are here, and it will not forgive your touch." Lyra nodded, gripping his hand. "I know. But I am not afraid. I will not leave you." Cale's chest rose and fell with a deep sigh. "You are remarkable, Lyra. Perhaps the most remarkable human I have ever met. And yet—" His gaze drifted toward the darkened horizon, where the first hints of dawn were struggling to break. "The shadows are patient. They will test us. They will try to undo what you have done." Before Lyra could reply, a sudden, chilling wind swept through the balcony. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, creeping toward them like silent predators. Cale stiffened, instincts honed over centuries alerting him to danger. "They are coming," he murmured, his voice low, filled with a warning she could feel in her bones. "Not all who walk these halls are loyal, and some shadows are more dangerous than swords or poison." Lyra held his hand tighter, heart pounding. "Then we fight," she said, her voice unwavering. Cale turned to her, eyes filled with both admiration and a hint of fear. "Yes, but this is only the beginning. The curse, it has waited centuries for someone like you. And it will not release its hold easily." A long silence followed, broken only by the distant cry of an owl and the soft rustle of the night wind. The kingdom slept unaware, while in the castle, a bond had formed that neither curse nor shadow could easily break. Yet in the deepest corner of the chamber, hidden from sight, a pair of eyes glimmered, cold and calculating. The curse had noticed the touch, the warmth, the bond, and it waited, patient and relentless, for the moment it could strike back. Cale and Lyra stood together on the balcony, hands intertwined, hearts beating in rhythm. The night stretched before them, full of unknown dangers and hidden threats. And though they did not yet know the trials to come, one truth burned brightly between them. The touch of a human could awaken a prince, but it could also awaken something far darker. The wind swept past them, carrying with it the faintest whisper of warning. And in the shadows the curse stirred, knowing that the fight for Cale's life and his heart had only just begun. The castle of Urindor had never seemed so alive nor so dangerous. Shadows moved through the halls with quiet menace, and even the walls themselves seemed to hold their breath, as if waiting for a storm to break. Yet in the prince's chamber, a fragile light persisted. It was Cale's life, newly reclaimed, tethered to Lyra's courage, yet always threatened by the darkness within him. Cale paced the length of the chamber, his steps echoing softly on the stone floors. Each movement reminded him of his weakness, how much he relied on Lyra, on the human warmth she offered him. He had survived death, but the curse inside him remained relentless, whispering threats, stoking his fears, and reminding him of centuries of solitude. Lyra followed quietly, carrying the basket of herbs and elixirs she had brought, now serving less as a delivery and more as a symbol of hope. "You cannot fight this alone," she said softly, setting the basket down. Her voice was calm but firm, like a tether to the world of life and light. Cale stopped and turned to her, silver-gray eyes darkened with a mix of gratitude and frustration. "I have fought alone for centuries," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "I have survived shadows you cannot imagine, yet now I fear my own weakness, and you risk so much just by being here." Lyra reached out and placed her hand lightly on his arm. "I am not afraid of your shadows," she said, "and you are not weak. You've survived what no one else could, but even the strongest need someone to hold on to." For a moment, Cale stared at her, searching her face for some sign of doubt or fear. There was none. Only courage, persistence, and an unwavering warmth that seemed to cut through the darkness surrounding him. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps life could be more than survival, that perhaps he could be something more than the cursed prince of Urindor. But hope is never unchallenged. That night, the shadows moved with purpose. The northern nobles, hearing whispers of the prince's partial recovery, conspired to take advantage of his weakened state. They gathered in the halls outside, plotting with greed and malice. They did not yet know the full bond that had formed between the prince and the delivery girl, but their instincts told them something had shifted, something dangerous. As Cale and Lyra moved through the corridors to check on the outer walls, they were ambushed. A group of cloaked figures stepped from the shadows, weapons glinting in the moonlight. Cale instinctively reached for his sword, though his body still lacked the full strength of life. Lyra's hand stayed firmly in his, grounding him, giving him the courage to face the danger. The leader of the nobles sneered, stepping forward. "So this is the girl who dares touch the prince," he said, voice dripping with scorn. "Do you know what you have done? You meddle in forces beyond your comprehension." Cale's voice was sharp and commanding. "Step aside," he said, tone brooking no argument. "You will not touch her or me." The nobles laughed, but the laughter died in their throats when Cale's eyes glimmered with a strange, unnatural light. The curse inside him, stirred by Lyra's presence, coiled within him like a living flame. It was dangerous, yes, but also a weapon. The nobles faltered, sensing the power that even the prince himself barely controlled. Lyra's voice cut through the tension. "Leave us. You do not understand what you are challenging." Her words were simple, yet they carried authority, courage, and a strange wisdom that none of the nobles expected from a delivery girl. The leader drew his sword, and in an instant Cale moved. Though his strength was not fully restored, the bond with Lyra gave him speed and precision. Each movement was a dance of shadow and light, of desperation and control. The nobles realized too late that they had underestimated the prince, and the human who had awakened something within him that even death could not touch. By the time the fight ended, the nobles were scattered, some fleeing in terror, others lying unconscious on the cold stone floors. Kale's chest heaved, sweat glistening on his pale skin, but he did not let his guard down. The curse still lurked within him, restless and hungry, but Lyra's hand in his reminded him that he was not alone. After the battle, they retreated to the prince's chamber. Kale collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. Lyra knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his forehead, murmuring soothing words. "You are not alone," she whispered. "Not ever." Kale closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her touch seep into him, calming the restless shadows within. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel gratitude without bitterness, hope without fear. The curse had not been defeated, but it had been held at bay by something far stronger: human connection, courage, and trust. Days turned into nights, and nights into a fragile rhythm of recovery and preparation. Kale trained when he could, building strength with Lyra at his side. She learned the layout of the castle, the hidden passages, and the patterns of the shadows that crept through the halls. Each day, their bond deepened, unspoken words passing between them in glances, touches, and the quiet intimacy of shared fear and triumph. Yet the curse was not idle. It tested Kale relentlessly, manifesting in strange visions, whispers that clawed at his mind, and shadows that seemed to stretch longer and darker than natural. He struggled to maintain control, to prevent the darkness from spilling over and consuming everything he had fought to protect, including Lyra. One night, as the moon hung low and silver over the castle, Kale awoke to a cold presence in the room. The shadows seemed to twist unnaturally, forming shapes that slithered along the walls and floor. The curse had taken a form, a manifestation of the centuries of darkness it carried. It spoke without words, pressing against Kale's mind with whispers of doubt, fear, and despair. Lyra stirred beside him, sensing the danger even before she saw it. "Kale," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm, "you are stronger than it. You do not have to fight alone." Kale opened his eyes, silver gray meeting her steady gaze. "I am afraid," he admitted, voice trembling slightly. "Afraid that this darkness, this curse will consume me, and I will lose you." Lyra pressed her hand to his cheek, warmth radiating from her fingertips. "You will not lose me," she said firmly. "I will not let you face this alone." The shadows surged, pressing closer, but Kale felt something within him shift. Lyra's presence was more than comfort. It was a weapon against the darkness, a reminder that life and courage could defy centuries of despair. He rose to his feet, taking her hand, and together they faced the shadows that threatened to overwhelm them. "You cannot win," the curse hissed, its voice echoing in the room. "He belongs to me. He has always belonged to me." Kale's gaze hardened, silver-gray eyes glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. "No," he said firmly. "He belongs to life, and life belongs to those who fight for it." With Lyra by his side, he felt the curse weaken, its form flickering like smoke in the wind. Yet he knew this victory was only temporary. The darkness would return, more cunning, more dangerous, more relentless. But for the first time, he believed that he and Lyra could face it together. The following morning, Kale led Lyra to the balcony overlooking the gardens. The first rays of sunlight cut through the lingering mist, painting the castle in gold and crimson. Birds chirped in the trees, and for a brief moment the world seemed peaceful. "You saved me," he said quietly, turning to her. "More than once. You risked yourself when you did not have to, and yet you stayed." Lyra smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "I stayed because I believe in you, in us, in what we can do together." Kale reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "I have lived for centuries," he said, "seen death, betrayal, and despair. But you have awakened something in me that I thought was lost forever." Their eyes met, and in that moment the weight of the curse, the danger of the nobles, and the long centuries of darkness felt lighter. They were not free, not yet, but they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. Yet even as the sun rose over the kingdom, Kale felt a shiver run down his spine. In the deepest shadows of the castle, something watched, waiting for the moment the bond between him and Lyra would falter. The curse was patient. It always had been. And it had learned that courage, love, and hope could be as dangerous as any sword or spell. Kale tightened his grip on Lyra's hand, feeling the life in her touch, the warmth in her presence. "No matter what comes," he said, voice low and steady, "we face it together." Lyra nodded, eyes shining with determination. "Together," she echoed. The wind whispered through the balcony, carrying the scent of flowers, rain, and the promise of a new day. But deep in the castle, the shadows stirred, patient and relentless, waiting for the moment they could strike back. And Kale, the prince who had faced death itself, knew this. The fight for life, love, and redemption had only just begun. The castle of Urindor had never felt so alive, nor so dangerous. Shadows stretched along every corridor, curling like smoke in the corners. Even the stone walls seemed to breathe, carrying whispers of centuries-old curses, long forgotten by those who lived within. And yet in the heart of the castle, a fragile light persisted. Kale, the prince who had returned from the edge of death, and Lyra, the girl whose courage had defied fate itself. Kale stood by the tall windows of his chamber, silver-gray eyes fixed on the horizon, where the first rays of dawn struggled to pierce the lingering darkness. The curse within him had grown stronger, more restless than ever. It whispered promises of despair, threats of destruction, and visions of a future without hope. Every heartbeat felt like a battle, every breath a negotiation with the shadow that lived in his veins. Lyra approached quietly, her hand resting on his arm. "The shadows are stronger today," she said softly, "but you are stronger too. We have faced worse together." Kale turned to her, a mixture of fear and admiration in his eyes. "This is no ordinary trial," he admitted. "The curse knows that you are here, that you are my anchor. And it will not forgive either of us." Lyra met his gaze steadily. "Then we face it," she said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Their bond had grown in the days since the northern nobles had tried to seize the throne. They had learned to trust one another in silence, in small gestures, in shared glances. Lyra had discovered courage she did not know she possessed, and Kale had learned to lean on someone without fear of being seen as weak. Together they had fought shadows, conspiracies, and the weight of a centuries-old curse. But this day was different. The darkness was no longer hidden. It moved through the castle like a living storm, seeping into walls, floors, and the very air they breathed. The curse had taken form, a black, shifting figure that radiated cold and malice. Its eyes glowed with a light that was neither human nor natural, and its voice, a whisper that echoed in the mind, promised pain and despair. "You belong to me," it hissed, coiling around Kale's mind. "You have always belonged to me, and now the girl who dares touch you will fall with you." Kale's chest tightened as the shadows pressed closer. For the first time he felt fear not for himself but for Lyra. He had fought death, betrayal, and curses, yet this was different, this was personal, and it threatened to consume the one person who had brought him back to life. Lyra stepped forward, unflinching. "You will not touch him," she said firmly. "I will not let you." The shadow paused, sensing her presence, acknowledging her courage. It hissed and surged, a wave of darkness that threatened to sweep them both off the stone floor. Kale reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "Stay close," he whispered. "Do not let go." Together they faced the darkness. Kale's body, though weakened, moved with the precision of centuries of training. His instincts guided him, but it was Lyra's courage, her unwavering presence, that gave him the strength to resist the shadows that sought to devour him. Each movement, each step, was a dance of light and dark, of life and death, of trust and defiance. The curse lashed out, striking at Cale's mind with visions of despair. He saw himself alone, centuries of life wasted, and the girl he cared for falling into darkness. Pain seared through him, yet he held on to Lyra's hand, grounding himself in her warmth. "You are stronger than you believe," Lyra said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "And I will not let you fall." Cale's eyes met hers, and in that moment something shifted. The shadows hesitated, recoiling at the bond between human and prince. The curse had thrived on isolation, on despair, but it had not accounted for connection, for courage, for love. With a roar, Cale pushed forward, his body fueled by the bond with Lyra and the desire to reclaim his life. The shadows twisted and writhed, but they could not break the force of two hearts beating in unison. The room filled with a strange light, not of magic, but of something purer, life, hope, and trust intertwined. The curse shrieked in fury, its form flickering like smoke in the wind. Cale and Lyra advanced together, their hands still clasped, their determination unwavering. "You will not win," Cale said, voice firm. "I will not let you." The shadow surged one final time, a desperate attempt to engulf them both, but Lyra stepped forward, placing her other hand on Cale's chest. A warmth radiated from her, stronger than the darkness itself, pushing the curse back, forcing it to retreat. For a moment the room was silent. The shadows lingered at the edges, but the darkness had been broken, driven back by something the curse had never anticipated: the courage of a human heart and the strength of a prince who dared to trust. Cale collapsed onto the floor, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. Lyra knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You're alive," she whispered, tears of relief in her eyes. "You're really alive." Cale smiled faintly, his strength returning with every beat of life. "Because of you," he said softly, "you saved me." Lyra shook her head, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We saved each other," she said. "I wouldn't have survived without you either." The first rays of dawn broke through the tall windows, painting the chamber in gold and crimson. The castle seemed to exhale, the weight of centuries of shadows lifting with the light. Birds chirped outside, and the scent of flowers drifted through the air, a reminder that the world beyond the castle still held beauty and hope. Cale stood slowly, Lyra supporting him, and together they stepped to the balcony. Below, the gardens glimmered with morning dew, and the kingdom of Urindor stretched out in quiet majesty. The curse, though not completely gone, had been weakened, held at bay by the bond they shared and the courage they had shown. "You have changed everything," Cale said, turning to Lyra. His eyes, once cold and distant, now shone with warmth and admiration. "1,000 doctors could not save me, but you, Lyra, you brought me back." Lyra smiled, her heart full. "And you gave me the courage to face shadows I never thought I could. We are stronger together." Cale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of centuries lift from his shoulders. "I have lived for so long, lost in darkness, alone. But now I see that life is not just about survival. It is about trust, love, and the strength to face even the deepest shadows." Lyra reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "And we will face them together," she said. "Always." The castle doors opened suddenly, and a messenger rushed in, bowing deeply. "Your Highness, the northern nobles, they have fled. They dare not challenge you again. Word of your survival has spread across the kingdom. The people are beginning to hope." Cale nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Then the kingdom will know that even in darkness there is light, and that light will never be extinguished." As the day unfolded, Cale and Lyra walked through the castle together. The halls that once echoed with whispers of death now resonated with laughter, conversation, and the quiet hum of life. They visited the council, who bowed deeply, their fear replaced with respect, and they sent word to the nobles that the prince had returned stronger than ever, his life now intertwined with the courage of a human who had dared to touch him. Even the curse, lurking in the deepest shadows, seemed to retreat, sensing that its hold over Kale had been challenged and weakened. It would not disappear entirely, but for the first time in centuries, it no longer ruled him. He had faced the darkness, confronted it, and emerged stronger, not alone, but with someone who believed in him. That evening, Kale and Lyra stood on the tallest tower of the castle, looking out over the kingdom. The sky blazed with the colors of sunset, and the world seemed to hold its breath, suspended between night and day. "You have given me life," Kale said, his voice quiet and full of reverence. "Not just survival, but life in its fullest form. And for that I will always be grateful." Lyra smiled, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. "And you have given me courage," she said softly. "Courage I never knew I had. We have changed each other and perhaps the world along with it." For a long moment they stood in silence, hearts beating in rhythm, eyes fixed on the horizon. The curse, though still present, had been held at bay by trust, courage, and the power of a bond stronger than darkness. Kale's voice broke the quiet. "1,000 doctors could not save me, but you did." Lyra's hand tightened in his. "And I would do it again," she said. "Always." The wind carried their words across the castle walls, through the gardens, and into the kingdom beyond. It was a promise, a beginning, and a testament to the strength of human courage and the power of connection. As the night settled over Urindor, Kale and Lyra stood together, facing the stars. The shadows would always linger, but now they were no longer alone. Life, love, and hope had reclaimed the castle, and with it, the prince who had once teetered on the edge of death. And for the first time in centuries, the future seemed bright, not because the curse was gone, but because two hearts had dared to face it together. The darkness had been challenged, the prince had been awakened, and the world was theirs to reclaim.